Yes, hello, can we hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let's give a few minutes for others to join. Okay, so let me share my screen so that we can start. Please, let's all be on mute. Okay, so today we're going to be building a software. We're going to be creating an ATM program. And in building this our ATM program, we're going to be using the 6 steps that we described earlier. And number one step is to plan out this ATM program. Number two thing to do will be to design this ATM program. And number three thing will be to develop this ATM program, which is the actual writing of codes. Number four will be to test this software. And number five will be to deploy it so that people can use it. And lastly, we can continue to maintain this software. So for every software you're building, it has to go through these 6 steps. So you plan out the software, you design, you develop, you test, deploy, then you maintain. Then in planning is when you ask yourself, or when you deliberate, or when you discuss with the owner of the software, what are the features that you want on this software. Then you also deliberate with your team, how do we go about building this software? So in the planning of this very software ATM program, we're going to assume that the person using this ATM has a balance of 5,000. So the first thing we'll do here will be to assume the balance that the person using this ATM has. I'm going to assume the balance of 5,000. So we're going to call this the starting balance. And we are going to also assume that this ATM session is running. So we're also going to assume that the ATM session is running. So that is that the person is currently using the ATM. So those are the two assumptions that we're making. Then after that, we're going to display ATM menu so that the person can choose what he wants. So we're going to display the menu. Then inside the menu, we're going to have 4 options like check balance, withdraw, deposit, and exit. So we're going to have options, and the options that we're going to have will be to check balance. We're going to have the option to withdraw. We're going to have the option to deposit, and we're going to have the option to exit. That is, you're not doing any other thing. Then we're going to ask the user to select an option. So you're going to ask user to select an option. And once the user selects an option, we should be able to read it in. We're going to be able to read in the option that is selected by the user. And after reading in the option, we're going to logically perform different actions depend on what the user has selected. So once we've selected it, depending on what we read in, we perform actions. And these actions could be to display the current balance, which could be to display current balance if option 1 is selected. It could also be to ask the user to enter the amount to withdraw if option 2 is selected. Ask the user to enter the amount to withdraw if 2 is selected. It could also be to enter an amount to deposit if option 3 is selected. Ask the user to enter the amount to deposit if option 3 is selected. And it could be to say thank you if option 4 is selected. Say thank you and exit if 4 is selected. And finally, we can also display invalid option if you select any other thing that is not 1 to 4. So display invalid option if 1 to 4 is not selected. Okay, so these are the options. So this is the first planning stage. So you need to plan out what and what will go into the software. So you plan it out like this. It's like I have to bring the other internet for sure. If it is down, then you are coming back. Mm. It's a better smaller. You do better small white one. Right, stop. This guy is not waiting. That's what we're doing. Once it is 8, you go there and collect it. Okay. So, yes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yeah, right. How are you? Can you hear me?
Fine, sir.
Okay, so you can put back your stuff on mute.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Okay,
Yes, yes, I'm hearing.
okay. Let me share my screen so that we can continue.
What did you say?
So let me share my screen so that we can continue. Can we still hear me very well?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, so okay, we are building a software for ATM machine, and we say that the first thing that we're gonna do will be to plan out this software. We are following the 6 steps. We plan, we design, then we develop. Then after developing, we test, deploy, and then we maintain. So we say that the first thing we'll do will be to assume that this person has a balance of 5,000. Then we also assume that he's currently using his ATM at the moment. So what we then do for somebody that is using his ATM will be to display the menu, and this menu should be able to show options to check balance, withdraw, deposit, or exit. Then you now ask the user to select one of these options. Then say the user selects one, then the user is able to check balance. If he selects two, he's able to withdraw. If he selects three, he's able to deposit. If he selects four, then he's exiting. So now, depending on what the user selects, he's able to perform either of the actions. If he selects one, then the current balance is displayed. If he selects two, then he withdraws. Now, it's very, very important that when he selects two, he enters the amount that he wants to withdraw. But if that amount is less than or equal to zero, then you have to call that amount invalid amount. So if the amount that he enters, if that very amount is less than or equal to zero, then it is an invalid amount, because that's typically what ATM does. Now, but if the amount is greater than the balance, then he has insufficient fund. So if the amount is greater than the balance, then he has insufficient fund. But if that is not the case, then proper withdrawal can go on. So if neither of these is the case, then proper withdrawal can go on. So those are the other conditions that are there if the person chooses option 2. Now, if the person chooses option 3, but the amount that he chooses is less than or equal to 0, then we can also say that it is an invalid amount. So if the amount that he chooses is less than or equal to 0, then also we can also say it's an invalid amount. But once it's not less than or equal to 0, we can have proper deposit being done. So these are the other options that are under this. So this is a complete plan for an ATM machine to be built or an ATM software. And once you have this proper plan done, the next thing will be to do the design. So the design is done from the planning. So from this plan, we can start designing. So in starting to design, we can see that the first thing that is displayed here is the menu. That is the first thing. So, but we have to note these initial assumptions. So the first thing I'm going to do now will be to write the ATM menu. That's the first thing. So I'm going to just write ATM menu. So we can also start it with something like this so that it will make sense. So we are doing the design now. This is actually how our app is going to look like. That is the first thing. So once we have this, we can now say check balance, which is option 1. So we can say option 1, and we can write in check balance. So you can see that what we are doing now is exactly from our plan. Then number 2 thing will be to withdraw, which is option 2. So we can say withdraw. Then option 3 will be to deposit. Option 4 will be to exit. So now, once we place this option, we can now read in the option that the user has put in. So I can just do something like this so that he will select an option. And once he selects an option, if it selects option 1, we should be able to ask him to enter the amount to withdraw. So I can also say here, if option 1, I can say enter the amount to withdraw. Now, if option 2, if he selects option 2, I can also say enter the amount to withdraw. That is for option 2. For option 1 should be your current balance is so and so. So if he selects option 3, If we select option 3, I should be able to say enter the amount to deposit. Now, if you select option 4, I should be able to say thank you for using your ATM. Goodbye. So that is the plan. Then remember, inside here, I'm going to write the other logic for valid amount. And also here, I'm also going to write the other logic for valid amount. So that said, we can then start building this application. So that is the design. Then the next step would be to build, and we already know what we do when we want to build. So in building, we're always going to use the using system, put our semicolon since we are using C# for this application, and we say everything has to be inside a class. So we're going to say class program. Then we open and close a curly bracket. Then inside the curly brackets, we'll now have our main method, which is where we write all our code for now. So I'm going to have this. Then I'm going to open and close another curly bracket. Then it is inside this curly bracket that I will then write the code. So the first thing I'm going to do will be as we have in the plans, to assume the balance, initialize the balance, and assume that the session is ongoing. So in order to do that, I simply say that my initial balance is equal to 5,000. So let's assume that this person has 5,000 as the starting balance. And because
Yeah.
5,000, the person can also have 5,000.0. So the data type for this
Mhm.
balance is decimal. So I'm going to use double for this. Then the next thing I have to initialize is to make sure that this program is running at the moment. So the person is currently using his ATM. So running is true. And any variable that has the value of true or false is always called a boolean. So having established these two, the next thing I will do is to say that while this person is currently running his ATM section, I want to be able to do the following. So while he is currently running his ATM section, I want to be able to do my design. So this is my design here. I want to be able to do this design. So now I'm going to say console dot write line. So the first thing I'm going to write in my write line will be the ATM. So I'm going to make sure that this is in a new line. So exactly what I had there, ATM menu. So that's the first thing I have. But make sure, because it's a string, make sure that it is in a double quote. So this line will write this very first line that is in my design. So the next thing will be to write the check balance. So I'm going to also say console dot write line. And I said that console dot write line is what you use in displaying any text you want to display. That's the method you will use. So I'm going to put my double quotes and I'm going to say option 1, which is check balance, check balance. Then I make sure that I put my semicolon. Then I come down and take the next one, console dot write line. Then in brackets, put my double quotes. The next one is option 2, which is withdraw. Then I put my semicolon, come down again, tab. The next thing is what? Console dot write line, double quotes, option 3, which is deposits. Put my semicolon, come down again, tab, console dot write line, option 4, which is to exit. Making sure that I put my double quotes. Then I'm going to close out with a semicolon. Then once I'm done putting all this option, I'm going to be able to ask the user using console.writeLine or just console.write and ask the user to select an option. And to be specific, to select from 1 to 4. Okay. Now, once the user types something in, I should be able to read it in. And for you to read something in, you have to use console dot readline to read it in, as we've used before. Now, when you read something in, because we want to check what this option is, whether it's option 1 or 2, and use it to do something, it's always better that you assign it to a variable. So the variable that we are going to assign it to is known as option. So what is the data type of this option? It is string. So you're reading the option that the person has put in, assigning to the variable option which has data type of string. Perfect. So once you've read in this option, you will now start asking yourself, is it 1, is it 2, is it 3? Depending on what it is, then you know what to do. So once I read it in, I'm going to ask myself, and I will say, is this option 1? So if the option is equal to the string 1, what should I do? If the option is equal to the string 1, what should I do? So if the option is equal to the string 1, what I will do is this. I'm going to simply console the write line. Your current balance is, I'll quote the balance. Because once he picks option 1, it means that he wants to check his balance. So for that reason, I'm going to console dot write line the balance. And for you to console something out, you can use the string literal that we've learned before and simply say what? Your current balance is, so we can put it in naira in anything. Then we'll put these curly braces in order to bring in a variable balance. So this balance is going to pick that 5,000. Please let me make sure I put semicolon everywhere, okay? So that is what is going to happen if you picked option 1. So the next thing now will be if the user picked option 2. So if the user picked option 2, what is going to happen? So if the user picked option 2, I'm going to now further ask him to enter the amount to withdraw. So if he picks option 2, what I will do will be to ask him to enter the amount to withdraw. So I'm going to use console dot write line I think it's better I use right here so that it will be on the same line. Console dot write, and I'm going to ask enter the amount to withdraw. Okay. So once I ask him to enter this amount, I will definitely need to read it in and save it as a variable so that I can use it later. So enter the amount to withdraw. So I'm going to save it as a double after reading it in. So I'm going to come here and read in this amount by saying console dot read line. So once I read it in, the next thing I will do will be to assign it to a variable. And what name do I give to this variable? I'm going to call it withdraw. and this variable is of type double. So why I need to write it? Because I want to use it later. That's why I assigned it to a variable. But you know that anything that is read from read line is always a string. So I need to convert it first to double. So in order to do that, I'll come here and say convert dot to double. Then I enclose everything in a bracket and put the semicolon. So by doing so, I've read in the value that he put, converted it to double, and assigned it to this variable withdraw. So once I get this amount, I should now be able to ask if this amount that I've gotten it as a withdrawal amount is less than 0, then it's an invalid amount. You remember in our plans, we said that once it pulls the amount, we should check if it is less than or equal to 0, it's invalid. But if it's greater than the balance, we'll say insufficient. But if it is normal, then we do proper withdrawal. So that logic is what we want to write now. So we'll check now if in brackets the withdraw amount, if in brackets the withdraw amount is greater than the balance, then we can console the right line. We can say is invalid amount. Great. Now, else if it is greater than balance, else if the withdrawal amount is greater than the balance,
I think it should be less than equal to balance.
yeah, I think that is when the real amount, that's when we're doing the proper thing. But for now, we're checking things that could make it not to work. So if you put a withdrawal amount that is greater than what you have in your balance, it will tell you insufficient form, isn't it?
Yeah.
IT, do you still think I'm wrong or am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm right, Abby.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So console dot right line in bracket. What I'm gonna have now is insufficient funds. Okay. So always make sure you put semicolon. Now, if none of these happen, these two issues, if you did not have any of these issues, then we should be able to withdraw. So we can comfortably now say else, please do the withdrawal. So else, I'm going to do the withdrawal. And in order to do the withdrawal, I will now say that the balance is equal to the balance minus withdraw. So I can say hence the new balance will now be equal to the former balance, which is 5,000, the former balance, which is 5,000 minus the withdrawal amount. IT, does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Although you know there is a short form of this, so the short form of this will be to say that balance is minus equal to withdraw. So this is another way of saying the same thing. Okay, so that is that. So option 2 is gone. So let's focus on else if it is option 3. So I think it would have been proper if I had put as if. Okay, so that we can use this exactly the way it is for option 3. So make sure that you have this in the right place. Okay, so I'm gonna pick the whole of this exactly the way it is. Sorry, this one has to be if, where this has to be else if. Okay, good. So I'm gonna pick I think it's better I just write it out so that it will be clear to you. So I'm gonna now have else if we have the option to be 3. That's the next one. Okay, so if it is option 3, what do we do? Okay, so if it is option 3, we need to say enter the amount to deposit. So for us to do that, we need to use console dot write line, or better still console.write, and then use new line inside. So that's two ways of saying write line. So I'm gonna say enter the amount to deposit. Now, after asking the person to enter the amount, you have to read in the amount. Very, very important. So I'm gonna say console dot read line in order to read it in. And anything that you read in is always good. You assign it to a variable. So I'm gonna call this amount that you're gonna be reading in. I'm gonna call that deposit. And deposit is a double. Because it's a decimal number, I'm gonna say double deposits equal to this number that you're reading. Then when you're reading it in is a string, so you need to convert it to double. To do that, I'm gonna say convert dot to double in order to convert it. And once I read it in, I cannot be able to use it. So if what I read in is less than or equal to 0, I'm going to say invalid deposit amount. So this is about the time I now say if the deposit, if the deposit that I read in is less than or equal to 0, then what should I do? If that is the case, I'm going to say using my console dot write line that invalid deposit amount. Okay, now once it's not a number that is less than or equal to 0, that means you can deposit any good amount. So I can now say else what should I do? So you see all the opening and closing curly braces I'm using. They are very, very important in your if else statement. So else I'm going to say that balance, the current balance once you've deposited, now the current balance will be equal to the previous balance plus whatever is the deposit amount. And this very expression, we can also write it in another form by saying that balance plus or equal to deposits. That's the shorthand form of writing this. And once I'm able to do this, I can then come down and console dot write line, and inside my brackets and double quotes, can use the string literal to say that deposit successful. New balance is the new balance. So I can say deposit was successful, and I will then say new balance is in naira. Because I'm bringing in a variable, I use this curly bracket and say balance. Okay, that is perfect. Then I can close this out with a semicolon. Then once I do that, I should be able to come out here and say else if the option that was picked is option 4. And if it is option 4, what should happen? I'm simply gonna console the write line and say, and this case is when the person picks option 4, which is to exit. So I'm simply gonna say in a new line, thank you for using our ATM. Goodbye. Okay, looks good. Now I'm going to close this out with a semicolon. And once this happens, I should be able to stop the ATM section by saying that running is now equal to false. Running is now equal to false. Now, if neither of these happen, else, so let's say the person did not select any of these 4 options, didn't even select exit, maybe went and selected something else. What should happen? So I'm going to simply say console dot write line, then in brackets I'm going to simply say invalid option, and I'm going to ask him to please to create an element. The timer is exhausted. Okay, let me finish this up, please. Please select. Let me quickly finish this. Please select 1 to 4. Okay. Then put the semicolon, and it's all done. So this is the complete code. It's to test it now. So we're going to copy it from here, put it in the test editor, and test it out. Okay. So that is good. So let me create another link for the stop screen.